Good morning. It is Monday, October the 22nd, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is your host, Ron, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So there's another episode this weekend with the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, where he was in a restaurant. But this time it was just one individual that went over, and there was audio of it where he was yelling at Mitch McConnell and telling him to get out of the restaurant. Now, a lot of the restaurant people pushed back, so to speak. They were telling the guy to leave and leave him alone, and were standing up for Mitch McConnell. I think just out of common decency. But again, the Republicans and Republican pundits, Rush Limbaugh played a clip of this, and Sean Hannity played a clip of this, but they did so without editorial comment. They did not say, make a value statement about it. And they missed an opportunity by failing to make that value statement, and an opportunity to draw a sharp distinction between Republicans, conservatives, and the left. And that would be to say that no Republican, no conservative would ever do such a thing. No conservative was ever going to go into a restaurant and chase Nancy Pelosi, or try to chase her out of the restaurant, or go to her and say, get the F out of here, whatever. Now, there was an incident over the weekend, in which Nancy Pelosi was heckled by people that consider themselves anti-communist, and they used the F-bomb several times. I heard a clip of that one as well, and I'm here to say they're not conservative. No conservative is going to do such a thing. Conservatives are better people, and as a political, considered as a political a movement, for lack of a better term, it is better than the socialists. Also, what governs this, the theory, the philosophical theory behind what was done to Mitch McConnell, is called activism. Activism is the theory that one should act first and think later. And so that's where all of these activistic activities, where people are chasing, jumping into an elevator with senators and then heckling them, or heckling people from the gallery in the Senate, in the case of the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh. And so, and other activist acts are, the whole idea is act first, think later. What that means is do whatever you feel like doing and then rationalize it. Because thinking about it means that you have to sit, number one, and make plans, and they do to a large extent have to do that. They have to make plans in terms of logistics and whatnot, for the most part. There are situations in which they can be more spontaneous. This situation with Mitch McConnell is one of them. But the idea is to be spontaneous. You see something, you act immediately, and then what you do is you think about it afterwards, meaning you rationalize it. So when people ask you, well, why did you do X, Y, Z? That's when you start thinking of a good excuse for what it is that you were doing, and you try to rationalize your behavior. It's a might makes right theory, if you think about it. I can do whatever it is that I am capable of doing. It's okay or permissible or ethical for me to do whatever I am physically able to do. If I am physically able to go over and yell and scream at Mitch McConnell, then it's perfectly right for me to do so. No, that's BS. As a matter of fact, there are universal rights and wrongs, and one of the universal wrongs is rudeness. Rudeness is a universal wrong. What that means is that, and when I'm saying universal, is it's wrong for everybody. Everybody on the planet, everywhere on the planet. It is, and for all times, that being rude was wrong 2,000 years ago. It's wrong today. It will be wrong 2,000 years from now. So now different places have different ideas of what may or may not be rude, but rudeness is a universal wrong, and there's no doubt that what these individuals are doing when they're being activistic is at the very least being rude. Also, if you're going to be activistic and break the law in the process, you get a wild hair and decide that you're going to break the window of somebody's store, you're going to trespass, you're going to commit assault or battery, then you're violating the law, whatever law that happens to be, wherever it happens to be, is wrong universally. It's wrong for everybody, everywhere, at all times. So that's the issue as far as the theory behind what it is that they're doing. Activism itself is wrong because it's counterproductive and it is bad for the individual. You may put yourself in a dangerous and potentially life-threatening position by being impulsive. Not only does the impulsivity put you in danger directly and immediately, it also puts you in danger in the long term. Acting impulsive leads to depression and depression and being depressed. It is not something that is going to make you happy, although there are those people that will try to convince you that the way to be happy is to be impulsive, to do whatever you feel like whenever you feel like. They'll tell you that that's the whole point of having money, is so that you can do whatever you feel like whenever you feel like. Wrong answer. You're going to find that you're depressed and getting more depressed, and you're going to get yourself into a negative cycle where you think, well, okay, I'm depressed. What should I do? I'll act impulsively. I'll just go out and do something crazy, and then that'll make me feel better. And it may make you feel better for a few seconds or a few minutes, but then you're going to be right back to being depressed. Because one of the things that this is emphasizing is a lack of control. It will tell you have no control over your life. Discipline and working according to a plan is a better recipe for happiness, because, again, it will let you experience control of your life. So when I come back, a little piece of the Sean Hannity Show. Thank you very much. And I finally found podcasts for the Sean Hannity Show that are apps that I can put on the phone. And I also have Glenn Beck on as an same thing, an app of podcasts of his show as well. So I don't have to constantly critique only Rush Limbaugh when there's others that I can also play for you and whatnot. So I'm going to play a little clip of Sean Hannity and then make a couple of comments.
Details on Hannity.com. I'm excited to be there. But the one thing is true about this headline is it is an embarrassing spectacle. And I'm telling you, the people of Texas are not going to put up with this. I know the people of Texas. They're not. You have what? I think they start early voting on Monday in Texas. So that's coming to a head. I mean, barring a disaster, all he is it's like, it reminds me of Obama in the sense that, he's cool. Beto O'Rourke. It is a outside Texas phenomenon, not a only, by the way, this is a New York, D.C. thing. This is a San Francisco, L.A. thing. He gets a full hour on fake news CNN. He can't even garner 1 million viewers. That's all. That's not just Texas. That's the whole country. We could have put it on shortwave radio and television. He could have done a Facebook live show or a Twitter live show and done better than 1 million. Anyway, so, Texans, by the way, we have some examples there of people asking non-citizens to register to vote. That's now becoming a big problem down in Texas. Oh, by the way, even MSNBC hailed Beto O'Rourke as a rock star. He could be the 2020 nominee. Try and get through Ted Cruz first. Good luck with that. But we're following all these races. Let me tell you where I think we are right now. I think the Republicans, between the caravan that we now have coming towards us, 4,000 people strong, that want to get to the southern border of the United States from Central America. I know that the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Nielsen, I had an opportunity to call her office earlier today because I actually do real reporting on this show and get an update. Apparently, as of now, there's full cooperation with the Mexican government that that's not going to happen. But 4,000 people, still 4,000 people. And what have Democrats, what have they resisted? They don't want a solution for the border problem we have where the opioids cross over, human trafficking is occurring. They now are using these drug cartels. You can't say they're stupid. They're evil, but they're not stupid. They've been using, and I can't even believe this is true. These drones that they fly with cameras above them? So they'll fly from Mexico into the United States along our southern border. They fly drones with cameras on them. And what they do is they map out where the Border Patrol, where agents aren't. So then they give the perfect entryway where they're most likely to succeed in bringing in their heroin and their fentanyl and drugs that are really being targeted towards your kids, your towns, your cities. That's how evil these drug cartels are and how desperate they are.
Okay, so a little sample of Sean Hannity there. One of the things that he does, that Rush Limbaugh does, that Glenn Beck does, is they constantly make predictions. And part of the reason that they do that is because it has a powerful sound to it. It's very intimidating. If you go to a child and say, if you keep that up, you're never going to have any friends. If you keep that up, you're never going to graduate from high school. If you keep that up, you're going to end up a juvenile delinquent. You're going to end up incarcerated. Okay, you're making predictions, and it has a very ominous, very intimidating sound to it. That is the technique of the left. The left wants to intimidate, and they do so because they do not, or at least they pretend not to, acknowledge reality, knowledge, or ethics, i.e. right and wrong. So, therefore, how are you going to move people? How do you persuade people if there is no such thing as right and wrong? The only way that you can do it is through manipulation, psychological manipulation, and bullying and intimidation. So you can do it bullying and intimidate physically, or you can do it indirectly through, again, psychologically. And one of the ways that you do that is by making predictions. And so that's what Sean Hannity was doing a lot of here, where he says, the people of Texas won't put up with that. Again, he's waxing left. He's aiding the left. He's flattering the left. What's the point in having conservatives if that's all the conservatives are going to do, is make the left look good? What he should have done is make a value statement, say that the people of Texas should not put up with it. And what they were talking about in terms of putting up with it is tactics and techniques of the candidate for the Senate for the Democrats named Beto O'Rourke. So So that's what he should be doing, is making the value statements. As far as the border is concerned, he and Rush Limbaugh was talking about a little bit this morning, and Rush Limbaugh to be a little bit mystified about why this is occurring. And he seems to speculate that it has something to do with the election, and most conservatives get that wrong. They think that, that the left is looking for some short-term socio-political gains, and really they don't care. What they're interested in, they're globalists, and they're interested in worldwide socialist revolution with a worldwide socialist paradise as a result. That's what this caravan of refugees, immigrants, army, however you care to refer to them, that's what they're all about. It is to create more friction. It is to create more problems. Now, Sean Hannity was speculating in terms of, or questioning, gee, I wonder where these folks are getting resources. You can't just mobilize 4,000 people and say, hey, let's walk. Well, how many? Is 1,500 miles, something like that, from Honduras to the border of the United States? Can you imagine that? If somebody came and knocked on your door and said, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you and I'm trying to get together a bunch of people to walk to Florida, okay, as a protest. So why don't you join me? Why don't you come on? I got 5 other people. We're all going to walk to Florida, and we're going to try and collect as many people along the way as we possibly can. Well, your natural question is going to be, well, what do I do about my job? What do I do about my kids? What do I do about my rent? What do I do about food along the way? What do we do about where do we go to the bathroom? Where do we get water? Where do we get resources to be able to complete the trip? So Sean was wondering about that, and I think it's a distinct possibility that this is something this march is backed by somebody, maybe George Soros, maybe another left-wing billionaire that wants to see the revolution happen before he dies. Because there's a lot of urgency to the activist activities that you see going on now, and I believe it's because George Soros has got to be in his 80s. And he's not long for this world. And he was promised, like all the other socialists and communists in this world, he was promised by Marx that there was going to be a revolution, that capitalism was going to fall by the wayside, and we'd have a socialist paradise, and it hasn't happened in his lifetime. And damn it, he wants his revolution, and he wants it now. He's tired of waiting, and he's going to put whatever resources he needs to into trying to create the revolution. So he gets some partial credit, by the way, for at least sort of walking the talk. If he really wants to walk the talk, he gives away all of his billions to charity or whatever, and then go out and agitate for change. But he does get some credit for taking the money that he has gotten and using it to try to create a socialist revolution. I don't think he really wants it. And again, I say that because if he really wants to be poor, he could do it. Give your money away and you can be poor overnight. You don't need to wait for a revolution for that to happen. So when we come back, I'm going to be reading from Ayn Rand's, the Ayn Rand lexicon. Thank you very much, and welcome back. And from the Ayn Rand lexicon, which is a glossary of terms that Ayn Rand has used, concepts, basically. Excuse me. So today's entry is called Communism. Communism. When at the age of 12, at the time of the Russian Revolution, I first heard the communist principle that man must exist for the sake of the state, I perceived that this was the essential issue, that this principle was evil, that it could lead to nothing but evil, regardless of any methods, details, decrees, policies, promises, and pious platitudes. This was the reason for my opposition to communism then, and it was my reason now. I am still a little astonished at times that too many adult Americans do not understand the nature of the fight against communism. As clearly as I understood it at the age of 12, they continue to believe that only communist methods are evil, while communist ideals are noble. All the victories of communism since the year 1917 are due to that particular belief among the men who are still free. Communists, like all materialists, are neo-mystics. It does not matter whether one rejects the mind in favor of reflexes or revelations, or in favor of conditioned reflexes. The basic premise and the results are the same. The communist's chief purpose is to destroy every form of independence, independent work, independent action, independent property, independent thought, an independent mind, or an independent man. Conformity, alikeness, servility, submission, and obedience are necessary to establish a communist slave state. It is the communists' intention to make people think that personal success is somehow achieved at the expense of others, that every successful man has hurt somebody by becoming successful. It is the communists' aim to discourage all personal effort and to drive men into a hopeless, dispirited gray herd of robots who have lost all personal ambition, who are easy to rule, willing to obey, and willing to exist in selfless servitude to the state. If America perishes, it will perish by intellectual default. There is no doubt, there is no diabolical conspiracy to destroy it. No conspiracy could be big enough and strong enough. As to the communist conspirators in the service of Soviet Russia, they are the best illustration of victory by default. Their successes are handed to them by the concessions of their victims. When men share the same basic premise, it is the most consistent ones who win. So long as men accept the altruist morality, they will not be able to stop the advance of communism. The altruist morality is Soviet Russia's best and only weapon. So let's see here. There was where she has said here, it is communist intention to make people think that personal success is somehow achieved at the expense of others. What she's talking about there is called the malevolent universe premise. It's a metaphysical idea. There's two. There's a benevolent universe premise, which basically says that the universe is a place that is benevolent to humankind, that it's knowable, and that success is therefore to be expected. The malevolent universe premise says the opposite, that the universe is a scary place, it is unknowable, and that failure is therefore to be expected. Now, if you decide to indulge in this fiction known as the malevolent universe premise, because I contend that the benevolent universe premise is correct and is so by the evidence of our senses. But if you choose to indulge in the malevolent universe premise, the fiction of that, then the question is, how do you explain success? Look around you. There's lots and lots of successful people. In many ways, you could say everyone is successful, just to different degrees. Okay? But let's take the extraordinarily successful, the Donald Trumps of the world, for instance. How do you explain that? If failure is to be expected, how would you explain Donald Trump? Well, the malevolent universe premise people, the left, claim that the only reason that anybody succeeds in a malevolent universe, anybody, but especially people like Donald Trump, is one of three ways: getting lucky, cheating, or a combination of the two. That is why they hate the rich and say that the rich must give their fair share, that the rich must give back. That's the theory behind it. They're contending the rich got the way they are because they have, again, gotten lucky, cheated, or a combination of the two. Very often, national, you won't usually see it with local sportscasters, but national sportscasters, ESPN, ABC, CBS, those folks, when they're interviewing successful athletes, will either have some theory that this may be a rumor even, that the athlete is using some kind of performance-enhancing drugs, steroids and the like, or what they will do is deal with the athlete in terms of luck. Do you feel lucky? How lucky are you to be where you are? How lucky are you to be as successful as you are? And the vast majority of, and as a matter of fact, every single one. Every single athlete has fallen into the trap because it sounds innocuous. Asking about luck, okay, I can go along with that. It doesn't matter, because they don't understand what's really going on. That the person that's doing the interview is trying to sell something. And what they're trying to sell is the malevolent universe premise. What they're trying to tell the audience is that the only reason this athlete is successful is because he got lucky. He got lucky. He just happened to be born with this natural talent. He just happened to be in the right places at the right time, and everything just fell into his lap. And why is that important? Luck. One of the reasons, again, is giving back. Because they'll turn right around to that same athlete and ask them about giving back. And a lot of times the athletes will volunteer the information. I'm doing XYZ on the side after the games and whatnot because I want to give back. It's my way of giving back. And so when they say that, they're confessing. The athlete is confessing that they have either borrowed or stolen something. Somebody asks you about giving back, the right answer, the correct answer is, I donate. I don't have to give back because I have not stolen or borrowed anything. Okay? If you have neighbors, if you have coworkers, friends, relatives that talk to you about giving back, that's the answer you must give them. To do anything else is to concede the point and to aid and abet the very people that you claim to oppose. Back in a minute. Thank you very much. Welcome back. And Tammy Bruce. Gotta love Tammy Bruce. She's got a tremendous amount of insight about the left. And that's one of the things with Ayn Rand that also I think made her special. A couple of things I wanted to conclude about Ayn Rand too was, number one, that Ayn Rand reminded me there in that passage that Ayn Rand also lived under the left. She lived in not just a communist country, the communist country, until she was able to emigrate to the United States. So she's got a keen insight on what it is that communism is all about. So with Tammy Bruce, she also has a pretty good insight from an American perspective as to what the way the left thinks, at least in this country, and particularly the new left. Ayn Rand is more, I think, attuned to the old left, the Marxist, the hard Marxist left, but Tammy Bruce is more keen in understanding about what it is that makes the new left tick. So, in her book, we were, we're talking about, where was she here? Oh, bleeping the word Jesus, ABC, because so there was some offhand remark by one of the hosts of The View, I think it was Joy Behar, where she used the word Jesus. ABC bleeped it out because they said, it was used in a rather inappropriate way, and we don't want to offend our customers. And Tammy Bruce's point was that that's a fiction or a lie on the part of the television network, that the reason they bleep Jesus is because they're atheist or atheistic. So, next section, news versus sanctimonious fatheads. Well, it would be offensive if Christmas weren't so poor, uneducated, and if Christians weren't so poor, uneducated, and easily led. That characterization, by the way, has a story of its own. It was widely reported in the fall of 1993 that is the way a Washington Post editorial described Christians, or at least evangelical Christians. In fact, the word are those of a Christian being interviewed by the Post. He was complaining that was the message he thought came through in Democrat Party channels or commercials. It's nice to uncover an urban myth, but it's also unfortunate that it is so easily believed that a comment like that could be a major newspaper's editorial position. The regularity of Christian bashing in the nation's news media, however, made it all too plausible. Mary McGrory, for example, a longtime Post columnist and a Pulitzer Prize winner, had this to say about a very personal way in which some people were responding to the Columbine school massacre. Quote, "But when it comes to preventing violence in our schoolyards, some fathead is bound to say that prayer is the solution," unquote. Although not guilty of referring to Christians as easily led, the Washington Post instead can boast the less subtle insult that Christians and other people of faith are, quote, fatheads, unquote. How does a working journalist cover a pro-Christian rally these days? Here are the comments of Jake Tapper, Salon.com's Washington correspondent, in his coverage of the presidential rally for family, faith, and freedom. Quote, "And when they were all done, a bunch of us reporters went into town, got drunk, and ended up at a local strip joint called Big Earl's Gold Mine. There's only so much sanctimony a guy can take," unquote. There was a great deal at that rally that I also disagreed with, but really, enough is enough. This petty and childish style of attack is based on the kind of bigotry that the left supposedly finds so appalling. Furthermore, is the liberal thing to do really to get drunk and leer at women who no doubt would prefer not to be taking their clothes off for a brute like Jake Tapper? Oh, but I forgot. This is Bill Clinton's legacy. Let me see here. No, I'm going to stop right there. So, again, excellent point, especially about Mr. Tapper's going to a strip joint. And also what you're going to find with the left is they're going to give you advice on how to be a good Christian. Usually it's in the form of questions like, gee, aren't Christians supposed to be tolerant? Gee, aren't Christians supposed to be compassionate? You know, so if you come out and say, hey, people that cross into this country illegally should be arrested, and you're a Christian, then the left you'll very often hear say, oh, well, I thought Christians were compassionate. And the proper answer to that is, I don't take Christianity lessons or advice from an atheist. Okay, because if they're left, they're atheists. I don't care what they say. We have in Pasadena, there's a church, it's called All Saints, and it's a Methodist Episcopal or something like that, some kind of weird hybrid. And it's supposed to be a church, but it's not. What it is a socialist clubhouse. All the church, or this clubhouse, this All Saints Methodist Episcopal clubhouse concerns itself with is worldly issues. It cannot, will not, and does not concern itself with the immortal soul. That is why I go to church. That is why I'm a Christian. That's why anybody is religious, because they're concerned about their immortal soul. What goes on earth is secondary, tertiary, etc., and a long second. The primary, because forever is as long as you get. So, but the atheists, they want to the atheists on the left, atheist period, the left period is always going to want to try to intimidate you by giving you advice on how to be a better Christian. Usually, again, in the form of a snotty question. Gee, I thought Christians were supposed to be compassionate. Well, you know what? I don't take advice on how to be a Christian, a good Christian, from an atheist. Or if you really want to sting them, I don't take advice on how to be a good Christian from somebody that's going straight to hell. When we come back, it's going to be, I'm going to read from the Black Book of the American Left by David Horowitz. Thank you very much. And kind of lost my place here. There we go. There it is. Okay, David Horowitz, the Black Book of the American Left, and we just left it on chapter 11. And what was he into again? No, this was kind of an internal thing. It started with Blaise Pascal, the French. And he was talking basically about God and Pascal's wager. And Pascal's wager is there is a God or there isn't a God. And if there is a God and you don't believe, you're going to end up in hell for eternity. If there isn't a God and you do believe, doesn't matter. Right? So you may as well believe in God. It's the better bet. That's why they call it Pascal's wager. So it was a long and rather well-written, very poignant chapter surrounding Pascal's wager. Chapter 12, Getting This Conservative Wrong. In the introduction to Rebels All, Kevin Mattson's unconventional look at conservatives, the historian acknowledges that conservative ideas need to be taken seriously. This is a refreshing departure from the wish of most liberals and all leftists that conservative ideas would disappear. It is also the reason I asked Front Page magazine editor Jamie Glazoff to interview Mattson and promote his new book. Readers of Front Page know that I have conducted a 5-year campaign to urge liberal arts professors, most of whom are leftists, to assign conservative texts in their courses so that there might actually be two sides to the controversial issues they address. And a quick aside here is not going to happen. They don't do what they do because they're interested in short-term gain. They're not interested in promoting particular types of dogma. The professors are going to do what they do to irritate and create social friction for obvious reasons. Back to the book. For my gains in conducting this effort to support an intellectual dialogue, I've been rewarded with the epithets McCarthyite and chief organizer of the campus thought police by academic leftists who want to teach their political prejudices as though they were scientific facts. In other words, what they want to do is exercise power. Again, to what end? So that they can agitate people and encourage people to take to the streets and start the what they believe is the inevitable revolution. Let me also say nothing is inevitable. John and Ken on the John and Ken show made the statement 2 years ago about a ballot measure to legalize the recreational use of marijuana in the state of California. And what they said, because they have a voter's guide. This year they have a voter's guide as well. Vote this way on this proposition, vote for this guy, whatever. So in their voter's guide 2 years ago, they said, vote yes on the marijuana initiative because it's inevitable. In other words, give up. Quit. That's never a good reason. Again, you make the presumption for the status quo. Marijuana is illegal, and I voted no. Marijuana is illegal, and it should remain illegal until you can show me an obvious case for change. And this never been done. This change occurred the same way all changes in a left-wing direction have occurred by intimidation. The right is simply intimidated and worn down until basically they just give up. Okay? And that's what John and Ken advocated. Just give up. Forget it. Don't bother. And the funny thing is that the conservatives have the easy job if they would simply realize what that job is and do it. And that job is to maintain the status quo. They simply ask the question, why? Easiest job in the world. Why? We should legalize marijuana. Why? We should have abortion on demand. Why? If the left is going to win in this country, make them earn it. Back to the book. Professor Mattson is unwilling to acknowledge his colleague's role in this anti-intellectual assault. Instead, he lays the blame for the lack of dialogue at the door of conservatives and their shrill rhetoric. I suggest that he pay some attention to his colleagues' discourse when they pretend to deal with conservative ideas. He might also pay more attention to what conservatives actually do. This conservative magazine has invited numerous leftists like him to come into its pages and promote their ideas and work, and we have treated them respectfully when they do. There's been no reciprocity from the other side. So, and again, this kind of disappoints me because, again, he was a lefty and he should know and understand, and it's one of those how quickly we forget moments where he actually expects or thinks that there's some kind of a debate going on here. The left is not conducting a debate. The left is trying to create a movement. They want a socialist paradise. They'd prefer that it go the easy way, but if it won't, they'll take the hard way, the revolutionary way, killing people, destroying things in order to create whatever their vision of paradise happens to be. So inviting them to express their opinions in the pages of a magazine is worthless. It's not going to change anything. You don't debate with them because there's no reason to. If you want to have a debate with people, a successful, useful debate with rhinos, Republicans in name only, the so-called moderates. Those are the people that you need to talk to and get them on the conservative bandwagon. But debating with lefties is worse than useless. The reason that I know this, Ayn Rand in her book called The Return of the Primitive, the Anti-Intellectual Revolution or Anti-Industrial Revolution, was writing about in Berkeley there was back in the 60s a student movement, and that there was an individual that was the head of considered the head or the leader of the movement. I forget his first name, but his last name was DeSalvio. So the administration of Berkeley, the University of California at Berkeley, I believe is the name of the institution. They decided to sit down with DeSalvio and have come to some kind of an arrangement, negotiate. So DeSalvio, which they shouldn't have done, because DeSalvio has no power, there's no basis on which to negotiate with this clown. But they decided to do it, maybe to try and prove to everybody how reasonable or they were, whatever. So they sit down with DeSalvio. They say, okay, we're going to have have a press conference. We're going to have people in attendance there, and we're going to announce that we've conceded to some of your demands, because I guess they figured that if they concede to DeSalvio's some of his demands, it takes the steam out of his movement, et cetera, et cetera. So, the agreement, part of the agreement was that DeSalvio would have nothing to say. He could be present on the stage where they were going to have the microphones and make the announcement. He could be on the stage, but he was not to make any comments. He was not to get on the microphone and say anything. That was the agreement. They both agreed that was the way it was going to be handled. So they have the press conference. They announce, guess what? These are the demands that DeSalvio has made. We've conceded to these demands, blah, 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 blah. Thank you very much. They walk away from the microphone. DeSalvio pauses for a few seconds and then approaches the mic. And I think before he could even get a word out, several police officers appear, because as you can see it on TV, appear from each side, grab him, and hustle him off the stage. So, one of the students, one of the participants, the followers of DeSalvio, was interviewed about this. And this is the way they put it. They said, "We almost lost. Okay? We almost lost. But we won because DeSalvio got hustled off the stage." Because a lot of this, again, is provocative. Their method is being a provocateur. And they provoked a hostile response from the police department. Nobody in the audience knows, so it looks bad for the university, really, because nobody in the audience knows what the rules are. Nobody in the audience at the time knew that the rule was that DeSalvio is not going to get to say anything. So DeSalvio stepping up to the microphone, he's about to break the rules. But the interesting part was when they say we almost lost. You would think that giving into the demands of DeSalvio would be considered a victory. But the left considered it no such thing. They considered it a loss. Why? Because if we have agreement, there is no social friction. The movement towards a revolution and socialist paradise comes to a halt. Okay, it's part of the reason that there's no agreement by the left on border reform, and why the left loves the border and immigration reform as an issue, because it's the gift that keeps on giving. Friction, 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 friction. The right, the political right, the politicians in Washington, D.C., the Republicans, know that there's only one way to get rid of the issue, at least for a period of time, and that's amnesty. You give amnesty, and the whole issue goes away for another 10 to 20 years. But nobody in the rank and file is interested in amnesty at this point. So, and this brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill, and I thank you for listening, and until next time, have a great day.